Hey, this is Ed Healy from Warpig Radio. I'm really excited to hear that Marcel is going to be turning on Channel 2, and he's going to be having some great guests on, including James from Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and my friend Ross Payton from RPPR, who's also the author of Zombies of the World, a great book that you guys need to check out. Maybe he'll even ask me on sometime. Who knows? But anyways, check it out. It's a great show, or at least it sounds like it's going to be a great show. My name is Ed Healy, and I am the Gamerati.
This is Channel 2, ARPG podcast with a Brazilian twist. In this episode, an interview with James Reggie about his game, Lamentations of the Flame Princess.
Let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Well, James, I'm here with the Grindhouse Edition of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. And I gotta say, it's a very neat box you got here. I'm assuming, reading Grindhouse Edition on the cover, I assume it's not the first iteration of Lamentations of the Flame Princess, is it?
No. There was an earlier box set called the Deluxe Edition, and that was released about a year previous. I had 650 copies of those printed. Those sold out within 3 or 4 months. I mean, really quickly, especially since it was such an expensive set with the lower print run. It was way more expensive than the Grindhouse edition.
You printed in Finland?
Yes.
So that's something very important we should let our listeners know. By the end of this episode, you're going to have a coupon code for our Brazilian listeners, and they should know they will be having, just like I had, a box delivered from Finland to their doors. So, why Finland?
I came here to get married.
How long ago?
I came to Finland to stay in December of 2005. So, I've been here a while.
You never went back?
Never went back. I have not been back to the States since.
Oh, yeah. My listeners should know also that you're not originally, what do you say, Finnish?
Finnish. Yeah.
Finnish. You're American.
Yes.
Yeah. I should say it's a very neat name. It looks like something heavy metal-ish.
Yes. I used to do heavy metal zine. That went from, what were the years? 1998 to 2007. I keep saying I'm going to do another issue any time now, but it's been a while now. And at the time, when I started the zine, there were a lot of zines that were dedicated to black metal and death metal, and they were all about brutal gore and things like that. And at the time, that's not what I was into. I was into the rising tide, I guess you can call it, of progressive metal bands. I was into things like Opeth and My Dying Bride, and all these bands that had these more poetic names.
Cannibal Corpse?
In their song titles. No, Cannibal Corpse is one of the first bands I got into in the early 90s, but by then, you hear a couple hundred albums. They're all going 100 miles an hour, and how many ways can you hear about guts and doing all that stuff? So I was bored of it by that point. I've come back full circle, as anyone that's seen the artwork for the Grindhouse edition, they'd be able to tell. But no, at the time, I wanted to fit in with these more emotional. I hate saying that because people are going to think emo, but I was into the more progressive kind of metal bands, and so I wanted to have the name for my zine that would fit into that you would know. Lamentations of the Flame Princess is not about the most brutal gore grind bands.
You're right. It's a very poetic name and very catchy, I dare say. It's hard to forget Lamentations of the Flame Princess.
Yeah. And so you got bands like My Dying Bride or Baal Sagoth, whose song titles are famous for being very long. So I just picked something that was like over-the-top ridiculous. Lamentations of the Flame Princess. And that's kind of I don't know, stuck. As you said, it's memorable. There are lots of things that happened because of me doing this heavy metal zine. I mean, that's how I got to Finland. I met my first wife because of this zine. And when I started publishing role-playing material, I saw no reason to change the name of the publishing company, because I figure if I was publishing as Lamentations of the Flame Princess before, hell, I'd just continue on with that name. It's a good name. Why change it?
It's a hell of a good name. And have you ever heard of players or GMs who play or run Lamentations of the Flame Princess? Have they inserted a Flame Princess in their games?
Not that I've heard of, although somebody's told me that there is a Flame Princess in the Adventure Time cartoon show.
Okay, our Brazilian listeners might not be very aware of. There is on the back part of the box and all around the books, there are warnings of explicit content and a red circle saying ages 18+. That's something very common in Brazil. White Wolf stuff has to have those kind of warnings. Books like Werewolf and Vampire the Masquerade has to come with those kind of warnings. Only for mature people, ages 18+. I think Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition has a recommendation 16+ or 14+. So based on that, if Lamentations of the Flame Princess were to be published in Brazil, I think the age cut would be like 72. And it starts with the cover. There's a very, I dare say, very sexy Lamia in the cover. The content is very. I was very surprised to see how. I don't want to say mature.
That would probably be not the right word. Some of it's downright immature. Yes.
Well, let's say liberal.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons I like indie games. The liberty the authors and editors and the artists can have. You're never gonna see any of those things on a D&D book or on a Pathfinder book, especially the covers. The Rules and Magic cover, for example, they evoke the idea of old D&D. Almost forgot. You have amongst your artists, you have Ernie Chan, and he died recently.
Yeah.
Have you managed to get some of his blood, like on the books before he passed away?
No. Unfortunately, he, when I was putting together the first edition of the game, the deluxe edition, I was, I never thought that would go anywhere. I thought I was going to bankrupt myself doing this, special box set for an old school game and packing it with all these books. And so I thought, well, while I'm doing that, why not Ernie Chan? Because when I was a kid, I believe it was my father who got me into the Savage Sword of Conan comics. And Ernie Chan was a very frequent artist right around the time that I started reading those. And it was so cool because that really got me into fantasy, got me interested in wizards and guys with swords. And, this is so cool. And look, that woman's got boobies. And, I was not even 10 years old when I started reading those. So when I saw that Ernie Chan was taking commissions, I was like, I have to do this. I have to.
Western culture condones like violence. You can have very violent cartoons, very violent games, violent movies, but we are a little uptight on sex and erotic imagery. I think it's stupid, but it's my opinion.
Actually, I think that distinction is not east-west, but north and south.
North and south?
I think I mean, do you think that people from Spain or Italy or things like that have such a problem with that?
Well, I have a couple editions of Drew now, so I don't think so.
Yeah. So, but it's, I mean, the U.S. and, even England a bit, it's a bit more of that puritanical thing, but, of course, the Nordic countries are pretty liberal, but, I may be just generalizing too much, but the warmer the climate is, people are used to not being covered up, and things happen.
I think you're right. But what I liked about the artistry is that the casual use of sex and violence. I think it was pretty good. I like it sets the tone of the game. After I finished reading the book and I got the tutorial, a couple of my players felt the atmosphere of the game right off the bat.
Although I do want to correct you, though. Now, there is lots of violence in the game, because I consider it more of a horror game than a straight-up fantasy game. So there is lots of violence. But I would not agree with you with sex being casual in there. I mean, there are pictures of naked people and, Medusa having sex, but when someone is naked or when it's supposed to be that kind of picture, it's about that kind of thing. There's not naked people and everything everywhere. It's just when the picture is about some sort of eroticism or somebody being naked, then it's about that. But when that's not the point, there's no sexy stuff in there. So that's pretty separated. Each picture's got a theme that it's going for, and it really doesn't mix that way.
I agree. Every picture that has boobs or something else, it's not erotic. It's horrible. Like it's to pass the tone of something weird's going on here. And even the Medusa having sex with the statues, it's not sexy. It's I think it's both things. In this particular case, this specific case, I think it evoked horror mixed with lust, then horror again, and it's like a car accident. You can't stop yourself from looking at it, but you don't want to look at it.
Yeah.
The text itself is not like that. The text is actually pretty clean and informal, and talks directly to the reader. And there are a couple of jokes. I showed it in the video. The guy on the Rules and Magic, the couple of heads like decomposing, and the guy. I haven't showed the last cartoon, like there's a cleric like evoking something, and on the very last page he gets what he wishes. But I haven't shown this on the video, so people can be surprised. But where the idea come from? Like there's a fight, I think on the referee or on the tutorial, there's a fight between two swords, a sword woman and a swordsman. There's an eye that looks at you after a couple of pages. Where did the idea come from?
I think that originally the idea was for the layout to not be really dense with just packing as much text in. I wanted the layout to be a little more airy, have some space in it. But then I got nervous about having so much space, so then I filled it up. But it was with pictures, so at least the text, would be broken up a bit. And then I just had this idea, well, how about here in this section where, the rules talk about combat, we'll have this sword fight going on, and you can see how it progresses and how it ends. And for the magic section, let's have this spellcaster doing this summoning, and it looks like you just have this one header image through the whole book, and then at the end, boom, you have this drawing integrated in the text. And it was the same thing. You've got the two heads that decompose as you go through the book. And I think it's the referee book that's got the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And those, the eyeballs, it looks like just a static header image for like halfway through the book. And then one of the eyeballs starts moving around and exploring around the page. I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, It's just something extra if you're paying attention and looking at it. It's like, oh, that's neat.
It was awesome. And I got more than a little scared when I was reading and flipping the pages without noticing the change in the eye, because it takes a while to move. So I thought, oh, this one is going to be static. So after some pages, I looked at it, and it was the very page where the eye looks directly at the reader. And I went, oh. I had to flip it through and do like those... like when you draw a lot of drawings.
Flip books,
Flip books, I had to do one of those flip books and see. The cover art of the box is from
Cynthia Shepard.
Cynthia Shepard is the same artist who did Rules and Magic, the cover art.
No, that's Jason Rainville.
And what's up with the red heads on the covers?
Well, that's the Flaming Princess. That's. Yeah, I decided, Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder have their iconic characters, so I thought I'm going to have some iconic characters too. And the redhead's the Flame Princess.
Rules and Magic, she's a teenager, right about to set up on her road to adventure, and on the Grindhouse Edition cover, she's already a grown up. And
then and then inside in the color insert of the Rules and Magic book, you see her having a bad time with a slime monster.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh, so I think that's the end of the Flame Princess.
No, it's not the end of her. There is new art coming out where she's just got one leg and no fingers on one hand. Now she's walking around with a peg leg.
Oh, I thought you would give her, I don't know, maybe an iron leg.
That would be too fancy.
Let's talk about the rules of the game.
Okay.
Would you say that Lamentations is a retro clone?
I would say it's a second-generation retro clone. It's not designed to very closely mimic any specific older game, but it takes stuff from, the older stuff via the SRD and the Open Game license, and it twists things a bit. So even if you're familiar with the old rules, if you follow these rules, play will not happen exactly the same. Mm-hmm. It won't be what you're expecting. It's a little more low-powered, a little more... it's a little less player or character empowering, so you can have a more horrific game because you never turn into this superhero character.
But why the Open Game license? Why did you choose to? You even have a sheet inserted here with the necessary Open Game license statements. Why did you choose to do it through the Open Game license? Do you know you could do a game without referring to the Open Game license because you can't really copyright rules?
You can't copyright rules, but there's so many things that, so many individual, especially the spell names, that's a big thing. Because I wanted my game to be compatible and a part of this old school renaissance that's going on. I wanted to be able to use my game with somebody else's adventures, or my adventures with their game system. Have it be this big community where everyone's doing stuff that you could use with everyone else's stuff. And this is, I've been playing role-playing games since, 1983 or 1984 when I got the Mensa Red Box. And I've played a whole lot of other games. I've owned a lot of other games. And I always came back to D&D. And so, when I discovered Dragon's Foot, and then when Castles and Crusades came out, and then Osric and Labyrinth Lord, it's why would I want to move away from that? I could have done a completely unique system and unique everything and done everything from scratch, but why? You've got this community of players, you've got this atmosphere of creativity and publishing, and it's a ready-made audience, and if you can do something a little bit different, people will respond, and you'll get your own, crowd and your own fans, and that's what I've done. Every so often, I think, okay, let me do something new, let me do something completely different. And after a while, I'm thinking, why? I mean, as a creator, as a writer, it's natural to want to do new things, but I like publishing. I like having physical books in my hand with nice art. And to do that, you need money. And to get money for this sort of thing, you need customers. And I fear that anything that I would do that is too unique and original, rules-wise, would mean starting everything from scratch. And everything I want to do can be done, with small tweaks and little changes to the rule system. So let's just do that.
They say that Dungeons & Dragons from Wizard of the Coast is the 3rd edition. They didn't say it right away. The Wizard of the Coast only called the game Dungeons & Dragons, although they had a suggestion of the number 3 on the Dragon and Dungeon magazine logos, but only afterwards they start to see, it's the 3rd edition. Because Advanced Dungeons & Dragons ended on the 2nd revised edition. But for a long time, there were 2 games, Dungeons & Dragons and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And I used to be a big fan of the Rule Cyclopedia games. It was actually not the Rule Cyclopedia, but one of those boxed versions of Dungeons & Dragons were published in Brazil from a game company. The black horizontal box with the huge red dragon and a guy with a halberd on the cover. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so, yeah.
And that was the Dungeons & Dragons game for a couple of years here. Then another company decided to release the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. I always remained a very big fan of the simpler Dungeons and Dragons, where you don't have classes and races. But when people talk about those retro clones, the old school Renaissance, I have the impression they forget the rule cyclopedia stuff. They only remember the advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But your game have in here, in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, there isn't classes and races. Like elves and dwarfs are classes. Was Adventures Dungeons and Dragons like that, or no? You are really taking something from the rule cyclopedia.
Back when I was starting gaming, I was just a kid, about 10 years old. There was Dungeons and Dragons, and that was, the Menser box sets at that time. That was later compiled into the rules cyclopedia. And then there was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And Advanced Dungeons and Dragons had the separate races and classes and all these rules for weapons versus armor. And
very complicated rules.
Yeah, very complicated. And if you were a kid, you see the Advanced, and that's for the grown-ups. We don't want to play this kiddie basic Dungeons and Dragons. No way. But as an adult, I've gone through my phases of playing GURPS, of playing the hero system, of playing these games that are just complicated rules and piles of things, and creating a character takes a long, long time. And I don't know. I'm just not interested in the complication anymore. I'm interested in getting down to play quickly. And so, I would definitely say I'm more inspired by, rules cyclopedia style than advanced style these days. Definitely.
The wizard isn't even a wizard on Lamentations. It's the magic user, just how I remembered.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things one of the reasons to use the open game license. I mean, I could have called it the, wizard, sorcerer, or whatever, but it's the classic. If you say magic user, everyone knows exactly what you mean. Everyone knows exactly where that comes from. It's a little pointer. Using the open game license, I'm not allowed to say that, this game is specifically compatible with this stuff and this stuff and this stuff without getting prior permission. But using stuff from the SRD, I can say, this game has a magic users. One of the spell is a magic missile, and everyone's like, I get it.
And I liked it very much because I actually put a wizard as the villain in my game. I'm a very big fan of Severed Sword of Conan. I think I still have a couple of hundred of those somewhere here.
Yeah, I'm collecting Dark Horse reprints these days.
Isn't it finished? Like they had a 60, maybe 70 edition run, then they stopped. Did they get back to it?
The Dark Horse, they're reprinting the old Savage Sword of in these big 500-page books. I think they just released the 11th one last month.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm going to look for that. I only have those old black and white from the 80s and 70s. Some of them are in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, the only thing I'm sad about is that they're not reprinting the backup features in these.
The backup features?
Yeah, you'd have your main Conan story, and then there would be some other shorter story after that.
The fillers, the mixers.
They've published Cull stories and the Solomon Kane stories as separate books, but there's a lot of things in there that are just weird things that you're never going to see again. And I wish they'd reprint some of those, but I'm probably the only person on Earth that's waiting for that. I remember I had this one where it was about these little people who lived, among humanity, but they were like little warriors and stuff. And then, they're running away from the house cats of the big people, and something happened, and this, and this normal person sees them and starts chasing them, and then this butterfly goes down his throat, and he starts choking, and then it says, "To be continued next issue," and that issue was already 5 or 6 years old when I first got my first big crate of them, and I never saw how that ended. And I was like, So, print the damn backup features. I've been waiting 30 years to see how that ended now. The guys would be like mounted, they got saddles on iguanas and stuff, and, and it's just like, I want to see how this ends.
To our listeners, if you know what Jim's talking about, send an email to him. Maybe you can work something out. Maybe if you have a copy, you can Xerox it and send it to him, something like that. Well, talking about Severed Sword of Conan, One of the things I try to mimic, not necessarily the books from Robert E. Howard. I started with the magazines. For me, Conan was a comic book character, not a book character.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So I always try to mimic those stories. And I've never managed to do it unless I removed magic from the games. And no player likes it. But using magic user as a class instead of wizard, I could actually have a wizard as a villain and not worrying about my characters thinking, oh, he must be just another adventurer. No, because in the group there was a magic user, not a wizard. The wizard's bad. Wizards, you don't want to mess with them. But magic user is okay. It's just a guy that uses magic.
Yeah.
And but the difference between the cleric and the magic users, I think you've done a pretty good job updating the rule set to the modern sensibilities.
Yeah, the spell lists have been all changed around too. Yeah, the spell lists I wanted to better differentiate the magic user and the cleric. If I'm remembering now, any version of the rules going back, they've had a lot of spells that they share. Mm-hmm. What I've done is I've changed that to where they share one or maybe two spells now in all their spell lists. There's only one in common, I think, dispel magic. Otherwise, I put all the things that were more cleric-y, over on the clerics. The things that didn't sound very much like a cleric, and I'll skip that over to the magic user. Now it's the magic user that's got speak with dead. He's the one breaking the laws of, the universe to speak with dead things. It's traditionally being able to talk with animals and things like that was witchcraft, seen as satanic. So let's get that away from the clerics. Let's put that over to the magic user side. Things like, the anti-magic shell. That sounds anti-magic. Let's get that over to the clerics. And I do that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I took away most of the blasting combat spells out of the magic user spell list. And I think that helps it not become, destroy everything. You still have your basic magic missile, but, at the start, that's pretty weak. It's just a little zap, and then it gets bigger as you move on, but there are no lightning bolts, no fireballs. So basically, characters will advance, and they'll get a little more powerful as they advance, but there's not this expectation that as they gain in levels, they're going to be able to take on armies. That never happens in my game.
That was the first complaint one of my players gave me. He read and said, what? No chain lightning? How come there's no chain lightning from a wizard?
Yeah, and sometimes, though, there are things I put in there that I don't really use in my games, but as I said, being roughly compatible, I put things in there. For example, I don't use halflings, elves, or dwarves in my game anymore. Everybody's a human, but I know lots of people like them, so they're in the game. The game is more than just about me. It definitely has all of my preferences in there, but things that that I don't use that other people might, I left some of those in there. If I was to do it all again, I think I might take all of the combat spells out of the magic user list, get rid of the magic missile and things like that. Make the magic user totally a utility kind of character. So it's just the fighter who's good at fight. But people say I've already gone too far as it is, so I don't know. Maybe it's good I did it the way I did.
Talking about the fighter, some of the things I really, let's say, dislike it, not to say hate it, about OD&D was the fact that the wizard was nobody at the beginning. You had trouble surviving the first 3 levels, and the fighter would do all the fighting stuff, all the good stuff. Then, right around 5th, maybe 6th level, the wizard started to get really powerful. Then, around 14th, 16th level, the fighter was useless. And the wizard was the all-powerful character that would solve all problems. And if the player who played the wizard would miss a session, nobody would like to play because, it's going to be too hard. Something you did with the fighter, I loved it. The idea, he's the only guy who improves his combat abilities. Why is that? Why just the fighter? Why not the specialist or the cleric? Was it to compensate for the wizard being too powerful?
It was like that, but before doing my own game, I was running a straight, as much by the book as I could stand AD&D game for quite some time, and then I was playing the basic fantasy role-playing game by Chris Gotterman, and I was doing some Labyrinth Lord, and I noticed that as the fighters gained levels, as everyone gained levels, the cleric was just behind the fighter in combat ability, and the thief was not that far behind either. And so what was the fighter's real advantage? He doesn't get any spells. He doesn't get extra skills. I mean, fighting and being tough is what he's supposed to do. So if you have everyone else creeping up on him, I mean, who else, as you said, the fighter really doesn't have a role in parties traditionally as you increase. That annoys me. So, let's get rid of all the combat bonuses. Your fighter is the fighter. He's the guy who fights. And everybody else has their thing, but when it comes to standing up and fighting the enemy, that's what the fighter does, and that's who you should always turn to.
Right. I liked it very much. I think it's giving a personality to the fighter. I agree with you 100%. He's the guy who fights, and he's real good at that. Now, about the specialist.
Yes.
I liked the nomenclature you gave, because when I was a kid, it was really hard explaining to my players from like middle school and then high school that only because your class is the thief or the rogue, it doesn't mean that you should go about stealing from people, especially the other player characters.
Yeah.
But you didn't change only the name.
Yeah, the experience that I had was that I would always want to play the thief. And so when you show up and, here's this new group of players you're joining, and everyone says, oh yes, I'm Bob the fighter, and I'm George the magic user. You say, I'm Jim the thief. Immediately, they act like you're going to steal everything they own. Oh, we don't trust you. Oh, why are you even coming along? And I'm just thinking, Jesus, what the hell is wrong with you people? Because I always played the character as an Indiana Jones type, an explorer who knows how to get around the traps and find the treasure. And look, we found the artifact. I never played it as a criminal.
With my friends, it was the opposite. When they saw that there was a class, they were playing a class called the thief, they would immediately become, a thief. Start stealing from the paladin, stealing from the magic user, hoarding treasure without revealing it to the fellow players. He would play the thief. They would play the thief. I always said, man, haven't you read The Hobbit? You like Bilbo. You're not a thief. You are, I don't know, a ninja.
Yeah.
But the specialist is not exactly that. The specialist is not a thief, a rogue, or a ninja.
But can be. That's the thing. It's it introduces the skill system into the game, and the specialist is the only one that can improve at the skills. The player gets to choose where that improvement happens. So if you wanted to play a thief that steals things, the skills are there to do that. If you want to play something else, you can do a scholar-type character. Just put points in architecture and languages, and suddenly you'll know things when you go places. If you want to be a ranger-type character, well, you put it into bushcraft so you can survive outdoors on your own, and it points into stealth. So there's a lot of options in different character types placed inside the specialist class.
Let me ask you something about the other classes, the dwarf, the elf, and the halfling.
Yes.
There are some illustrations here, some art that follows or is right on the page of the magic user. There's a woman exploding some guy's head. On the fighter, there's a heavily armed, I guess, fighter exploding some guy's head. On the specialist, there's we have an Indiana Jones was the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The guy switching like an idol for a bag of sand, something like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, the dwarf, there's the dwarf here on this page, on page 14. He just killed a bunch of guys and he's raw, all covered in blood and arrows.
You'll notice he's badly wounded. He's got an arrow sticking out of him. The whole thing about the dwarf is he's tough. So you got to show him, he's been injured, he's been through hell, but he's won. I
thought that was awesome. But then I turned the page and I see the art from the elf.
Well, I was, people always play elves as these like hoity-toity, so sophisticated, you silly human kind of things. And for some reason, I got this idea of this like French aristocrat kind of thing.
Now, about the picture, besides the description of the halfling, there's a slaughter there, kind of an army fighting, or maybe the aftermath of a fight, but there's no halfling there.
No, but there is a halfling in the picture, because the whole thing about the halfling, the entire purpose of the class is that they're the class that stays out of trouble. They're good at stealth. They've got the best saving throws in the game. They're not very proactive in having things that they do, but they're the kind of person that, they're the kind of character that stays out of the trouble that everyone else gets into. But look at that halfling picture and think to yourself, where's Waldo?
Where's the halfling? Why haven't I thought about it? Oh, I found it. I just found it. Very, very cool. Very cool. Whose picture is this? Who's the artist?
That's Amos Orion Stearns. He did most of the interior art, not all of it, but most of the art in the Grindhouse box.
D6s, man. Why so many D6 rolls? Is it something that you came up with mathematically, or no? It's just coincidence. You roll a lot of D6s in this game.
Yeah, well, traditionally in these sorts of games, you use D6 for looking for secret doors. You roll D6 for opening doors. And, the combat stuff, would use the D20. And, but when it came to doing things, traditionally the game hasn't had a lot of rules for doing these sorts of things. But when they did, they were D6. So why not just keep it? It's right there. Just expand those couple things that have always been there into the full skill system. The kind of die that you roll, I think, is pretty much irrelevant. I could have made a D12 roll or a D20 roll, but I don't think it makes that bit of difference.
I think it's elegant. Using a D6 is elegant, and it throws my players off. They're used to calculating the odds on their heads, because nowadays Dungeons and Dragons is all about D20s. You roll D20s for everything. So every number on a D20 is 5%. So they are used to calculate, I have only 30% of hitting this guy, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to try something else to get a +3, because +3 is 15%. Using a D6, I think it's a more regular dice. And I think it looks pretty when you have to roll D6s instead of D12s or D20s or D10s.
I don't know. What I said about earlier, about liking things more simple. Mm-hmm. Just rolling a D6 and having 6 possible numbers just seems to be a little quick and easier than the D20. It doesn't make any real difference, but it just feels easier.
Let me ask you something about the font you used on the book, on the titles.
Okay.
This is very interesting font because the E's, they have like a tail that spans through.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that seemed like a good idea at the time, although if I were to do it again, those E's would be normal.
Could I give you a suggestion, if I can?
Yes.
The S, when you have the S on the titles, is a stretched S. I think the name of the symbol is, I think it's schwa. I don't remember.
No, it's an S, but it's just the font is based on a 17th century font.
Yeah, that symbol is used by IPA for the sound. It's the phonetic alphabet for the sound of sh, the sound of SH. So I caught myself reading the titles. Let me see if I can find some here. Come on. Disease. As I know the IPA,
sheesh.
Yeah, just sheesh. I got it pretty quickly, but it was very funny on my mind. And you get 2 S's together; they become It's a German symbol. It's
that is normal. That's not going to have any of the funny characters, but I think it makes it a little personal or a little different just to have these headers that I don't think they're illegible or anything, but it's definitely different than what people expect when they first open up a book.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And talking about the text, from every now and again, you stop you're describing something and talking about some rule, and then the next paragraph or the next chapter, you stop and you talk to the reader. I think there's even a place here say, "Hello, here's James Raji."
Yeah, that's the referee book. That's definitely got that different tone than say the rule book. I don't do so much of that in the rule book. The referee book, though, that's it doesn't have very many rules in there. It's more about advice and how to get the feel of the game right and how to make it weird fantasy role playing and not something just like every Dungeons and Dragons game you've ever played.
The description of weird, does it come from those old pulp magazines like Weird Fantasy and Weird Tales? Why weird? What not horror to describe the game?
If you say horror, that pins you down. Then if I call it horror fantasy or just a horror game, then everything I do would have to be horror. But if you say weird fantasy, that encompasses a lot of things. Nobody can define exactly what it is. It's a wonderful thing. If you say you take it because Lovecraft called things weird fiction, and that gives you horror immediately in your state of mind, but then you're still free to do other things besides horror. And, as long as you do something that connects it back to some sort of weirdness, it fits. It's non-restrictive. It suggests something, but it doesn't require it.
To me personally, this is very personal, but to me, the idea of a weird fantasy this evening we're going to have I'm going to run a weird game. It evokes to me not necessarily horror, but bizarre, macabre, and a little comedy, a little how do you say it? Dark humor, black humor.
Yeah, well, I've found that the worst things that are happening to the characters in the game, the more the players are laughing. What do you mean my foot just turned into lead? Ah! And everyone's like, ha, ha, ha. And that's one thing that a lot of people, take a look at the rules. And there is a free version, art-free version of the rules. You can link to it. The link to it is off of my blog and main website. People look at the rules and they say, well, these rules aren't very weird. But to me, the rules are just a baseline of, if this situation happens, how do we resolve it if there's some sort of argument? Everybody agrees at the table. There's no reason to look up the rules. So it's just, the resolution systems and everything. But at the same time, the weirdness doesn't happen in the rules. But if you do follow the rules, especially the magic, and that first-level magic user spell summon that I put in there, your entire game is going to go off the rails. I put that...
There's 4 pages for one spell, right? Let me see if I can find it.
It's more than that, I think. And then in the Grindhouse set, there is a Stranger Storm, the introductory adventure. It's designed to mess with people's heads. Every time I've run it, the players are all pulling their hair out, not knowing what to do. And it's intentionally set up to be a confusing kind of adventure. So if somebody picks this up as their first role-playing game, it's got the full tutorial in there. It's got it's got as much advice and how-to stuff in addition to the normal rules. But there is no way in hell that any first-time player trying to run a game is going to pick up a Stranger Storm and run it without everything going horribly wrong. I'd almost guarantee that any experienced gamer cannot run that adventure without things going horribly wrong. I wrote the thing, and when I run it, things go horribly wrong. The entire point of the adventure is to confuse the hell out of everyone on both sides of the screen, because there is no way that the players are going to follow the breadcrumbs from the front to the end of that adventure. It's not going to happen. The entire point is to force the person running the game to start improvising. You've got the book, it says this, but now gameplay has nothing to do with what it says in here anymore. You just have to make it up on the spot. Here's the stuff, here's the baseline, now you go. So anyone that's trying to keep things by the book, it's going to be hopeless. So the entire point there is not to present an adventure that's easy to run, to introduce people. The idea of the adventure is to just, throw them directly into the deep end of the pool and say, good luck with this, pal, you're going to need it.
Let me see if I can tell you what happened on the two opportunities I had to run the Stranger Storm without spoiling anything to the listeners. The first time around, the adventure was over in, I think, 45 minutes.
Oh, God.
And I was laughing my head off. It was so funny. I played with experienced players like old D&D guys who used to play in the 80s, something like people older than me. I'm 32. And those guys were playing role-playing games when I was still playing Atari. And they got so confused that they kill each other.
Yeah, okay, good. That was one of the possible outcomes I intended to be in there.
On the very first scene, they were still in the I don't want to say anything. On the first, like...
I'd say first part of the adventure, yeah.
Yeah, on the intro. The two guys ended up killing a third one. And they said, this is stupid. Marcelo, are we doing something wrong? And I went, nope, you're doing everything absolutely right. And they got so frustrated. They said, okay, can we reset the adventure? Can we start again? And I went, well... Give me 15 minutes so we can eat something, and if you want to change anything in our characters, you just as well. And we reconvened half an hour later, and we started the session again. This time they got to the end. Two characters one character ended up dying on a fight. They finished the story with an argument on the very last scene.
Yeah.
With an argument so serious that I thought the players, not the characters, would start a fight. But they went through, how do you say, analysis paralysis. They couldn't decide what to do with that final part, that final conundrum. So one of the NPCs ended up doing something very bad, and they blame me, basically. They blame me for the adventure. They say, oh, you were unfair. The adventure wasn't fair. And I told them, the adventure is not designed... Yeah, the adventure is not designed to be fair. The adventure is designed to be weird. And then they got it.
Yeah.
When I said that, they said, now we get the game. Can we play next week?
I do a lot of adventures that are really designed. Well, not necessarily designed this way, but if players aren't thinking, if they're not organized, they're always going to be at each other's throats because there are things that are going to happen. I'm going to put things in there that are aimed more at getting the players off balance and to make sure that they can't agree, that they don't stick to a plan. And then once that happens, they're lost, they're gone. Not necessarily means their characters are going to die, but everything's going to go to hell. That to me, if you can orchestrate that, especially in a published adventure, which then goes out to people you've never met, never talked to, and they can replicate that same chaos at their table and have people just like, oh no, to me, you're hitting weird fantasy perfectly, or I'm hitting weird fantasy perfectly, however you want to say that. But that's what it is. It's not about getting your players together and going through some plot or some dungeon, with the expectation you're going to win at the end. No, it's that, we're getting the players together, we're going to go into some situation, and what's going to happen to us now? To me, is the focus of the game. What strange, horrible situations are the players going to go through today?
And I love the idea that it's not about killing monsters. It's about finding treasure. And the focus is really on the characters and not on the fight. The focus is on the weird stuff, traps and sorcerers and things that we can fight and things that man wasn't supposed to know.
The treasure thing, it's I like it because it's a motivator. If you know your characters advance through treasure, then you can say, you running the game can say, oh, there are rumors about this wizard's tower and these, strange ruins out in the wilderness, and the players will go for it. And, and for what I said, how the idea is just what horrible things, so make sure you put the reward in there. So there's, so they don't feel stupid for putting themselves through it. But if that's not the reward, then why would they go to these horrible places if there's not a specific reason for it? Now, some people have said that, digging for gold or whatever doesn't feel very weird. There wasn't a lot of treasure hunting in Lovecraft, and things like that. And I understand that too. So, but how do you motivate the players? I definitely don't want to turn it into a thing where killing monsters is the main motivator, the main advancement scheme. And I really dislike things where the person running the game just gets to say off the top of their head, okay, you gain a level for no reason because I want you to play higher level guys. I wanted something that's that's definite, that's defined. For example, in A Stranger Storm, there is treasure in there. It's in a place that the treasure usually isn't. But there's an amount of it that there's no guarantee the players are going to find all of it. They might find none of it. They might find a little bit of it. They might find all of it. So that is kind of a barometer. It's an objective measure of how well they did in this adventure in finding the reward. And if they don't do so well, then they will advance slower. And it's got nothing to do with the guy running the game making those decisions. It's something that's, once the scenario is set, it's entirely up to the players playing well. And that, I like that kind of advancement system.
There's exploration in Lovecraft.
There's exploration, but it's not looking for treasure. Like for At the Mountains of Madness, there's tons and tons of exploration, but it's not like there's no reward for them. They're doing it for the knowledge. Yeah. But it's difficult to do in a role-playing game, The
statement of Randolph Carter is just out of curiosity that the guy goes to the subterranean, and there's Dreams on the Beach House. I think you're right. It's exploration for exploration's sake, not out of looking for treasure. Actually, they're looking for trouble.
Yeah, but if you do that in a role-playing game, I think it's a little bit difficult to create motivation. Oh, here's this really dangerous place, and you're looking at your character sheet, and you're thinking, I go in there and I could die. Why the hell would I do this? It's a legitimate question. If you look at someone and just say out of character, because that's the game, Joe, and then Joe feels like, well, all right, oh, God, this guy died. I made a new character, and that guy died. But if you have that reward mechanism, it doesn't have to be treasure, but some sort of reward mechanism that is dependent on the characters playing and not the game master funneling them to exactly where they want, then it's there's give and take. Okay, I went through all that crap. What did I get? Okay, there's a reason for my character going through that. There's a reward for it. There's a sense of the whole experience point mechanic that there's a record that my character has done this and it means something. That gameplay means something, and it's not just deciding whether or not the interesting thing at the end that the game master made up was that interesting enough for us to sit here for 4 or 5 hours to get to it. I mean, it puts the game into the role-playing game.
No monsters. And let me say, I liked it very much at first because I thought, well, there's already too many monster books out there. I personally own Monster and what's the name of that? They used to come with the binder, Monster...
Yeah, the Monstrous Compendium, I think they call it.
Monstrous Compendium, yes. I have Monstrous Compendium 1, 2, 4, and 17. There are way too many monsters out there. Compatible, right? They are kind of compatible, only with slight adaptations.
Oh, yeah.
But then I read what you said about the weird, the unexpected. If the idea that if you keep repeating monsters, it's going to become
a safari.
Yeah, safari. Yes, I think those are the exact words you use. I like that idea, but at the same time, I thought there's space here for like a regular monster. Let's say there are no orcs here because there's no setting. Let's say that players find orcs for the first time. They don't know what... Of course, they know what that is. They're role-playing games. Originally, I liked the idea of the recurring monster. The players say, oh, those orcs again. Oh no, let's run. It's a type 4 demon. They know that they died. Not the characters know. The players know that like they lost 3 or 4 groups for a type 4 demon. So they run away. I like the idea of this familiarity. We know, those are kobolds. How many? More than 6? Let's run back home. We can't do it with more than 6 kobolds. But then, as I ran the game, as I played the game, as I read the book again, I came to appreciate what you did. I think it was a gift, Jim. A gift for me personally. For me, to my game master career. The idea to let loose, let pre-made monsters go away. Yeah, I don't need to flip through a book and find the monsters I want. I came to realize it was more important to create a monster suited for what I wanted instead of trying to find the monster on a book. And for that, I thank you. You changed the way I see monsters on my D&D adventures.
Well, thank you.
I hope other DMs appreciate it as well.
Yeah, when you say there are no monsters, there are 2 in there. Plus there is, I think, half a dozen pages discussing how to make monsters. So the game is not silent on monsters, but A Stranger Storm, it has its own monster that is part of that adventure that I think gets 2 pages of description. And then it does have one other sample monster, which is a vampire. And I picked the vampire specifically because nobody's going to read this book and think that this game is about vampires. So it was safe to put that in there. At the same time, the vampire has so many special powers that I could demonstrate this is how you put all these weird powers onto a creature in this game and be able to give that example.
Is the idea of the tailor-made monster. You need a monster for this, so you create it specifically for that adventure, and it fits best. You could go on a store and buy a suit, or you could have a suit made for your body. So it's just making a monster to fit the adventure. I think I almost said it. The monster
but it's
for
not
a stranger.
Quite. The whole mechanic is different.
Yeah.
In A Stranger Storm than the monster you're thinking of. It's not exactly the same at all. The way it works is different.
Yeah, that's what I loved about this concept of not giving pre-generated monsters. I loved it. And the monster creation is pretty simple because the rules are kept simple. But what did you think about first? Did you think about the monster, whose name we're not going to say it here, about the Stranger Storm, or you thought about adventure first and then you tailor-made the monster?
I think it was the monster first because because that's generally what I think. I pick a monster or I create a monster and I build an adventure around that. Because if you set up like, oh, here's some dungeon and there's a wonderful map, what do I put in it? Well, of course you're going to, because you don't have anything in mind yet, that's when you start looking at monster books and think, okay, we'll put 3 of these in room 5 and 4 of those in room 10. And I'm of the opinion, if you can't think of a good monster, if you can't think of a unique monster that fits, you shouldn't be using a monster at all. Because that cheapens the whole thing. I mean, I ran in my home game, I think we went a couple months with the players never meeting anything supernatural. Their enemies were other people. They were doing political stuff. And for a while there were no spellcasters in the party either. It was just fighters and specialists. And so it was almost some sort of historical game for a while. And then I decided enough of this. Let's get some magic stuff back in here. But, there doesn't have to be magic and monsters, in every session. And I think it makes it more special. It's more serious if, here's the magic doodad, if, you're not seeing 10 of those every adventure, right?
I couldn't agree more. You said you were thinking about changing the adventure for an eventual next edition. Why?
Because this is a game that I play. This isn't a game that I designed and then I'm hired to promote it. I mean, this is my game that I play week in and week out. Different situations happen, or you see things that you like, or you see, as a designer, I consider this a living game. If, in another 2 years, let's say I sell out all the Grindhouse editions and it's time to print some new stuff up, that's going to be 3 years of gameplay with this that I've been using my game for actual play. Of course I'm going to have new ideas. Of course I'm going to have tweaks. Nobody sits down for years and plays the same game by the book without their tastes changing, I don't plan on eliminating the total compatibility or anything. Or, maybe next year I'll have a change of mind about that. But to me, the Lamentations of the Flame Princess is what I'm interested in at the time. Of course, I'm not going to change weird fantasy role-playing into a superhero game. But, if in a couple of years it's time to sit down and think, what's the third edition of this game going to look like? I don't feel bound into deciding that it has to be exactly the same as it was. And, maybe I'll lose fans, maybe I'll gain fans by doing that. But let me tell you, in role-playing publishing, there's really not enough money in it to entice someone to do something that they don't think is fun. So if Lamentations stops being fun with me, I'm better off going and getting a job mopping the floors overnight in the grocery store. Really. So as long as it's fun and exciting for me, and if I have to make changes to things to keep it exciting, I'll make the changes. And then the people can decide they like it or not. That's up to them. But I've got to be satisfied with what I'm doing in order to really do it. So
that's very cool. Well, in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, there's no setting.
There's no official setting. The referee book has ideas about what to do with your setting and how to create one, how to set one up. In my home game, I'm using Earth in the 17th century as my setting. And right now, they've been mercenaries employed by the Spanish in the New World. Was it Fort or St. Augustine? I forget which it is off the top of my head. But then they've gone treasure hunting, looking for the lost city of gold, this lost tribe of Aztecs that had moved north, and they've been chasing that. And now they just got back to the Gulf Coast and just got on actually a Portuguese pirate ship they got picked up by, and that's where we've left off, and they're being taken to I think Rio de Janeiro. Every so often there'll be some spellcaster that is usually bad news, especially when the players don't have a wizard.
Are you thinking about converting that into a setting? Maybe some PDF?
Not really. I think if people want to do that, they're better off just getting history books than anything I would do. For the God That Crawls adventure that will be out very soon, that will have a section dealing with guns and cannons and that sort of thing that updates the rules up to the 17th century. And actually, that adventure specifically takes place in England in the year 1600.
Nice. Now, but there are adventures or scenarios, right? You are actually planning a couple of Kickstarter projects, aren't you?
Yes. Well, I've just finished a couple. One I finished in the spring was for the Monolith from Beyond Space and Time and the God That Crawls. There were some layout issues, required more art, so I'm waiting for that to get done. Those are a bit late. This is Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I'm a one-man show. I work with freelancers. Things sometimes take a little longer than I figured they would, but that will be coming out definitely very soon, because as we're speaking here, that process for everything is getting finished up. And then I ran a crowdfunding campaign because a lot of people have told me they wanted the Rules and Magic book available separately, or they wanted it in hardcover. So what I did is, offered that up, and that succeeded, and so that's in the works. And one of the stretch goals for that was an adventure by Ken Hite. He's got the deadline, and he's working on that. So that adventure will be coming out hopefully in a couple months after people hear this. But the idea of the stretch goals for the adventures for the hardcover crowdfunding campaign excited people so much that I thought, okay, then let's do one just for adventures. So in the month of July, there will be 19 separate crowdfunding campaigns happening at the same time, each for a different adventure. And if you just, want a couple of them, you just contribute as you will. But if you want all of them, there is a big discount for, just dropping, the money to get all of the adventures into one of these campaigns. It's a little bit risky because if not enough adventures fund then you're paying more than you would have if you'd contributed individually. But this way, there's no waiting in line. You don't have to wait for the first adventure to get funded before going to the second one that you really want. You can just go directly to the one you want. It's the opportunity I'm putting out there. It's up for the people to decide if they want them or not, if they want all these adventures. The reason I'm doing it in July and not waiting until some of these other things have already come out, that's business and tax reasons. Because if these things succeed, there's going to be a lot of money coming in. And I have to make sure that the things get done and printed and mailed and all the writers and artists get paid before the end of the year, so I don't get taxed on this huge amount of money sitting around waiting to be used.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a simple business thing. If I want stuff to be done by the end of the year and get this money paid to people so it's an expense, I got to start that in July, and so here we go. So take a look at that.
We're going to put a link on the show notes for the forum, the forum topics discussions. And will there be PDF versions or only printed versions?
Yes. Now there will be PDF versions. If that's what you want, then there won't be a discount for doing all the PDF versions. So if you want the PDF version, you just contribute to the campaigns individually. And, and then when it's done and ready in PDF, you'll get the link for that and, you get the adventure. It's pretty straightforward. It'll be a few months. Everybody, we've got people like Vincent Baker and Monty Cook, that are up for adventures. Once they're done, or once the campaign is done, these people all have outlines at this point. They've all told me what the adventures are about. But, a lot of these guys that are professionals, they're not going to sit down and write it until the funding is in place, because this is what they do for a living. And they're not going to drop everything and write a full adventure, with the funding still up in the air. So you got to give them a couple months to actually write it, and then we got to lay it out, get the artwork done. So it's going to take a few months. But I think, I've released the Grindhouse Edition in Bornheim and Isle of the Unknown and Carcosa. So I think I've developed a bit of a reputation that the stuff will come out and it will look great. And then, people like Vince Baker and Monty Cook, I repeat those two names because I think they're the biggest names worldwide that are on the list for writing adventures here for these campaigns. I think they've got a good reputation. People trust them to deliver because they've delivered so many times in the past. I like our chances for this thing, and I hope people are interested, and I hope people make it happen. Because as I said, as a small company, it's tough to go to someone like Monty Cook and say, okay, I'm going to put this money down, and I'm going to pay you to write an adventure for me. They require a bit of money, and then I still have to pay all the other expenses for getting a project, out the door and to people. And I think one of the best ways of getting a small publishing company to take that next step to being a medium-sized publishing company is having a healthy-sized catalog. So that's another reason for doing 19 of these at once. You give people an opportunity for a big discount on them, which will hopefully attract more people, which gets more adventures funded. And suddenly I've got a catalog. People have hopefully the most awesome adventures they've ever seen by a lot of well-regarded people. Everybody wins. So I hope it turns out that way.
I hope the best for this project, man. I hope it gets funded, and the products that are coming, you're putting out, they're awesome. Not only Lamentations of the Flame Princess, the quality is superb, and the art and the description and the ideas. It quickly became one of my favorite role-playing games. I've been practically playing Lamentations and Savage Worlds.
Awesome.
I completely abandoned Dungeons and Dragons. I've ran a weekly session, a weekly campaign for more than 3 years, every Sunday, and sometimes Sundays and Fridays, from 1st to 16th level. And then I just got sick of it. I got sick and tired and said, I don't want to play this any longer. And then Lamentations came around, and I saw that I was missing out on a lot of stuff that I could be doing. And I just can't describe it. I love this stuff, man. I love this. I can't wait to throw Carcosa on my players, but that's going to have to wait a little. It's too deadly. But we're going to talk about Carcosa some other time. For now, let's wrap this up with you have something for our Brazilian listeners, haven't you?
Yes. Through the month of July, if you order from the web store at lotfp.com, and so this is for the Grindhouse edition of the game, Carcosa, Vornheim, ton of stuff over there. I will give people ordering from Brazil a 25% discount off the basic price of the goods.
25%. Got that, people?
And so all you'll have to do is when ordering, it gets to a point where it'll ask you for a coupon code. You will use the coupon code Brazil. And that's with a Z because I'm American and that's how we spell it. Use the coupon code Brazil, all capital letters, and it'll automatically, do the 25% discount.
Don't miss out, listeners. 25% to Brazil using the coupon code Brazil with a Z, only through the month of July, right?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, my Portuguese listeners, but it's only to Brazil.
I could extend it to the Portuguese listeners and have it, I could do that if you've got a lot of Portuguese listeners.
No, I have 2.
Oh, okay. Well, screw them then.
All right, they just should get the regular stuff. They got paid in euros, right? So they can buy it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you.
This was Channel 2, soundtrack courtesy of the Brazilian artist Marcos Klein. Show notes and contact information can be found at podcast.marcelodior.com. Thank you for listening.